It is a story that is seizing the national headlines with calls for changes at the top. We're talking about the concerns raised across the country with the VA, the waiting lines, and of course, reports that deaths have been linked to lack of access to care in Arizona, as many as 30 deaths attributed by veterans, deaths of veterans to the delay in care provided. Joining me now, a former client of my company and a candidate for the Republican nomination for the United States Senate. Dan Sullivan joins us. Dan, welcome to the Dave Stieren Show.
Hey, Dave. Great to hear your voice.
Good to have you here. Now, you are, here's my take on this. Of all of the 5 or 6 people who want to be a United States Senator, you still have a role in creating future clients for the VA. You train Marines.
Correct.
And someday in the future, whether it's for a toothache, long-term treatment for burns, mental illness, or an adjustment of a prosthetic limb, you are training future clients for the VA.
That's right.
When this story broke, this is not a secret that there have always been challenges with the VA. First of all, how well do you know General Eric Shinseki, and what are your thoughts on the VA stories as we're hearing them now?
Well, look, I mean, it's great in some ways that the national media finally picked this up, but I'll tell you this. This has been a story that's been going on for years. And what's so frustrating here, when I launched my campaign in October, we raised the issue of treatment of our veterans from the minute I launched my campaign. And then on Veterans Day, we put out our first policy paper for my campaign on Veterans Day last year, called the Promises Delivered Project, highlighting these very problems and saying we as a country have to do something more about it. We wrote op-eds. We went on talk radio. We've been beating the drum on this, what the USA Today last year called a national disgrace. And the fact that our Congress and the Obama administration finally seem to be waking up to it is a national disgrace. The federal government shouldn't be doing a lot of things in Alaska, but one thing they should be doing is taking care of our vets.
Is there a special ownership that the Obama administration has on this issue? And let me tell you why I asked the question. And it doesn't. I mean, it's been a mess forever and a day. We can agree with that. The genesis wasn't with the election of President Obama. Do you agree?
Well, it's been a mess for a long time.
Right. But one of the
but
things,
they were briefed.
Right. And this goes to the point of my question as to why it's especially troublesome for the president. Prior to his inauguration, I believe it was during the campaign during his first term, he addressed the VFW National Conference, and he told members of the VFW after he was the nominee, "I've got your 6," talking about the concerns raised about the VA. He blasted the Bush administration and the conditions at Walter Reed, and he said this was his number one priority, and it's failed. The initiative, closing Gitmo, he hasn't done that. And we can go into the whole list of what he has or hasn't accomplished. But this is not something that the president knew about when he read the papers a few days ago, as he ridiculously claimed. I didn't know it was a problem until I read the papers. He owns this issue, doesn't he?
He owns it, and here's the thing. It's gotten much worse under the Obama administration and the Senate Democrats' time and power. Let me give you an example. And we put it in our paper. You can go to our website, Sullivan2014.com. We launched this in November, our focus on this issue. But this issue of backlogs and wait times has grown from, in 2009, when the Obama administration came into power, about 150,000 to over 600,000 last spring. And so it's gotten much worse. And now you have these other issues of secret waiting lists and things. It's gotten much worse.
Shinseki. Eric Shinseki, former General United States Army, if I recall correctly.
Correct.
Not a bad guy.
No.
Served his country with honor and distinction. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are. I've said this earlier. Shinseki could be the guy that shows up with the best of intentions. I don't believe in my heart of hearts that General Shinseki wants a single vet to be mistreated.
No.
Or a single vet to go without the care they deserve. But the bureaucracy that we have created, that is the VA, I mean, a general is used to saying, get that crap done. And crap, I would imagine, kind of gets done when a general says it.
Usually, yes.
Is the bureaucracy that we've built in this system one of the largest impediments to providing vets with the care they deserve?
Well, look, I mean, Dave, the point you make about General Shinseki, and when I called for his resignation last week, in addition to the American Legion, and now a bipartisan coalition of U.S. senators have, except for Mark Begich, but I mentioned, very honorable man, served his country 30-plus years in the U.S. Army, served in Vietnam, great service to the country. But this is about accountability and leadership. And after 5.5 years of no one seemingly even paying attention to the issue, there have been IG reports after IG reports. There have been press reports. It's only getting worse, and at a certain point, this administration needs to take accountable actions for leaders to get things done, and they haven't, whether it's Benghazi or the IRS, and this is another example. And, you know, with regard to Senator Begich, he was quoted in the Wall Street Journal recently saying, if there's a problem, the Obama administration needs to fix it. If there's a problem, he sits on the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. Senator, there's a problem. It's not if.
Going forward, and well, actually, I can't go going forward yet, because a couple days ago, the President of the United States addressed cadets graduating from West Point. He never, ever mentioned what was going on with the VA. He's been roundly criticized for that. You train Marines. You're a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps Reserve. You're overseeing the formation of a brigade, correct?
An Anglico unit.
An Anglico unit.
That's right. Up a new one.
Part of what you're doing, and people read papers. Young Marines read papers. People know what's going on. In the course of training, they come up to you. And they say, hey, Colonel, what is the deal? What is the deal? I mean, I'm going to be using the VA. I may have to get some bridge work done, or something may happen to one of my buddies after they're deployed. This boils down to the essence of what we honored veterans on Memorial Day on Monday.
That's right.
The young men and the young women who step forward to serve. How do you answer them? What do you say to those young Marines that you're training?
Look, I think it's a great question because, as I mentioned, the federal government has a sacred trust or responsibility to these men and women in particular who have fought and sacrificed for our country. And I don't think anyone disagrees with that, but we're failing on it. And, you know, one of the great privileges of still being in the reserves and a commanding officer of a unit is you get to see on the ground floor what the men and women who are still serving and deploying are thinking. And I'll give you one example, Dave. It's another issue of not taking care of our veterans. In December, when I was doing training, one of my Marines came to me and asked me if I knew about this budget deal that Congress had just passed. This guy was getting ready to retire, 19 years in the Marine Corps. I hadn't heard about it. It was news. Came back to Alaska, saw, and what he had told me turned out to be exactly right. This budget deal in December focused on cutting the retirements of one group of federal employees only, veterans, guys who had served, even disabled veterans, cutting retirements by tens of thousands of dollars. No other federal workers were affected by this budget deal. It was an outrage. And the guys who are still serving, the women who are still serving, when they see this, whether it's the budget deal that Mark Begich voted for in December that cut eviscerated benefit or retirement, or the lack of leadership and accountability at the Veterans Administration now, it undermines their notion that there is a sacred trust between the government and those who serve and sacrifice. And it's not good for military morale.
It seems to me that in the backdrop of the Memorial Day service on Monday, with the story swirling around about the VA, with the continued discussion of how we compensate men and women, not just when they're deployed, but when they're no longer actively serving this nation, or the commitments made to their family, it to me structurally is low-hanging fruit, and yet continues to be a challenge for this country. Dan Sullivan, you are running to be the GOP nominee for the United States Senate. If people want to find out more about your thoughts on this issue and your other positions, how can they do that?
Yes, Sullivan2014.com, and come on to our website. As a matter of fact, last night we just launched our Veterans Coalition in Fairbanks, and I'll tell you, Dave, it was a great event. Veterans from a whole host of different wars, but the topic we discussed that was front and center at this coalition launch last night were these issues. And my campaign is going to continue to focus on them the way we've been focusing on them from day one. And Mark Begich needs to join me in calling
Dan
for General
Sullivan,
Shinseka's resignation.
Always a pleasure.